Here is the most likely way that Oklahoma can beat Tennessee in its turnovers. No one is better in the SEC, not even close, in turnover margin. Let's discuss that for a moment. It shouldn't be a great surprise that Brent Venables, a defensive coach, has a defense that produces turnovers. So I call him up on Off the Hook Sports right now. Let's discuss some of the numbers. Oklahoma quarterback Jackson Arnold's the 13th highest rated quarterback in the SEC, has thrown 2 interceptions this season. Nico, for the record, is the 3rd highest rated quarterback in the nation. And we'll talk about his turnovers in just a second. Now, with Oklahoma, they lead the SEC in turnover differential with 2.6 per game. No other SEC team averages more than +1 in turnover margin. Okay. The Vols are at 0.3 in turnover margin. So, and Josh Heupel admitted it yesterday that Brent Venables didn't admit it. He said it yesterday. And that they do a great job of punching the ball out, and they do a great job in the secondary of disguising coverages. He didn't say that, but their front is really active, and they absolutely are a turnover team. Now, what do you take from that, Caleb? Because they haven't looked great. And turnovers, if you win the turnover differential, unless there's a massive talent gap, you win about 80% of the games if you win the turnover margin, right? So what do you make of that? Because there's 2 ways to go here. One, okay, they've gotten some fortunate turnovers, so they're really not that good because they haven't really played anybody. Or B, do you say, man, this is a young quarterback. This is a smaller tailback. Turnovers could be a factor. That's scary. Which direction do you go given those 2 options?
Given who they've played, I go with the former. I go with they're just not that good. And I think there's some evidence for this because as has been brought out, the teams they played are notoriously bad at taking care of the football. I mean, Temple is, as of right now, David, I'm pulling up Temple, they are dead last in the nation in turnover margin. So they just don't take care of the ball. And truth be told, Tulane is not much better, believe it or not. They are, I believe I'm looking it up right now, tied for number 99 nationally in turnover margin. So again, this might have more weight. And Houston, by the way, the best team they've played is dead even on turnover margin. So nobody they've played is actually good at taking care of the football. And I think that now you could say this. You could say Oklahoma playing them skewed their turnover margins to where they are. That's not going to skew you to dead last in the nation, though. And so I just think that Oklahoma has played 3 bad teams. They've lucked out to win some games. And look, most of the time, guys, y'all are gonna. This is gonna come across as crazy, and people may disagree with me. And I think, Dave, every coach in football is gonna want to bash my head in for saying this. Most of the time, turnover margins, that is the part of football that is totally dictated by luck throughout the year. And I think that there's no science to it most of the time. Sometimes there is. I'm not going to deny sometimes there is. But I think most of the time, the turnover margin at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, between teams that are similar talent-wise, it's kind of dictated by luck.
Okay, that's it. Now, Tennessee is tied for 9th at the 0.3 turnover margin, the differential. Okay, but let's inspect those turnovers for a second. How many fumbles have they lost this year? Goose, not a one. How many interceptions have they thrown this year? 3. We talked with Jacob Warren yesterday, our Monday guest, and we certainly appreciate his appearance. Brought to you by Peak IV Hydration in Sevierville and in South Knoxville. They can make you feel great. Go to Peak IV Hydration, and you can order the patches too, which are fantastic. So let's look at the interceptions. 1, meaningless garbage time, right?
Correct.
2, as Jacob Warren, he didn't want to throw anybody under the bus, but as he hinted, Brew McCoy let up a little bit on what I thought was an errant throw until we discussed it. Somebody gave me a little tip. We discussed it, I think, in the post-game show. And then brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. And then the other interception, an elite pro quarterback takes the sack. But I don't expect Nico to be at that level right now. So that's understandable. Tennessee might be 0.3 right now, as they've been able to pick off one pass and gain 3 fumbles, but they very easily could be right there with Oklahoma and certainly above South Carolina. That's at +1 without much stretching or reaching. I mean, they could be right there. I think that this is a team that is actually very good, even though they're tied from 9th in protecting the ball when you really inspect the numbers. Now, at some point when we get to like the end of October, the numbers are the numbers, okay? And they'll even out, and I'm not going to inspect every single turnover. But right now, I think this is a team that protects the ball.
You know,
I can tell when you're going to disagree with me because there's like a long sigh.
No. I'm thinking I agree, but I think there's one caveat here on this stage, and we have to be honest here. And I'm pulling up the numbers now, but he didn't throw him under the bus, but that interception did seem like Brew McCoy broke off the route. The other interception that Nico threw was a busted block, which was a communication issue. Nico Iamaleava is, I hate to sound so old school, but he is in his first year starting with Tennessee. Typically, interceptions are communication issues. Is that fair to say? How many interceptions have you covered throughout your career that are almost always communication issues between the quarterback and the receiver?
Well, I mean, most every one where there's a good quarterback. I mean, because you don't see at this level just a lot of errant balls. Well, okay, right. The AJ Suggs interception for 99 yards. I mean, you don't
floating it out. Right.
That was just he didn't have enough athletic ability, so you don't see that often.
Right.
Not at Tennessee.
This was the one concern I would say is sometimes in September you can maybe say that there's some sloppiness because teams are developing chemistry a little more. Look, Hendon Hooker, when he was en route to New York, David was his second year starting. He had some sloppy plays in September of 2022, didn't he? I mean, that Pittsburgh game, he made a mistake after the receivers were not on the same page a lot of times in that Pitt game that they had to win in overtime. And so with an Oklahoma defense that's opportunistic, this time of year you're going to see that more often than not. I mean, I think that's why you see a lot of the Tennessee-Florida series in the 90s oftentimes came down to it almost always came down to, wasn't it typically there was one team that just made a litany of mistakes in the game because they just really hadn't come together yet. They really hadn't developed their chemistry. That's how the series always played out, right?
Yes.
And most of the time it worked in Florida's favor, but in 98 it worked in Tennessee's favor. Because let's be honest, Tennessee beat Florida in 98 because Florida had not played together that long, and they made so many mistakes in that game. And
so let me ask you this. Does Tennessee have to break even or win the turnover battle to win at Oklahoma? And I'll remind you, this is under the lights and on the road, and you know how crowds can get with turnovers.
No, I don't think you have to break even. I particularly don't think that because one underrated fact in college football today is that a sack is almost a turnover. Analytically, Dave, a sack is almost like a turnover.
It's very true.
Yeah. And Oklahoma has no offensive line, and Tennessee is going to bring pressure. So while Tennessee may lose the turnover battle, come on, they're going to win the sacks battle. I'd be very shocked if they didn't win the sacks battle. If they didn't have like 5 sacks to Oklahoma's 1.
Well, you could be absolutely right there, because Oklahoma's offensive line is very suspect, and we know that Tennessee has just a rotation of defensive linemen that could come in. Our poll question: who does Nico Iamaleava remind you of? Bryce Young got 54%. Troy Aikman got 0%. Josh Jobs got 19%. Somebody else and commenting below got 26%, excuse me. So I ask you now, if Tennessee has to blank in the turnover battle to beat Oklahoma, win, break even, doesn't matter. I'll give you an update on that when we get a few more votes in. Caleb, are you more concerned about Dylan Sampson, a smaller back, turning the ball over against a team that's coached to punch the ball out, hat on the ball? You'll see that. You will see the Oklahoma red on the brown football at some point. And or are you more concerned with Nico turning the ball over? Because we just made an argument that Nico's interceptions arguably weren't his fault. Now, I wonder if Dylan Sampson is ready for a team that's much bigger, much more physical than anybody he's played, and is coached to strip the ball.
Well, remember this: Dylan Sampson has been facing this Tennessee defensive line all season and throughout camp. So you would think he is.
Yeah, but I don't see Tennessee as the type of. I don't see them try to strip it. I mean, I think this is a real coach thing, Caleb. I don't think that this is just balls are popping free every once in a while. That sounds weird to say.
Well, Dylan Sampson, it's not like he's new to this style. I mean, Dylan Sampson ran for over 600 yards last year and played in all 12 games. So you have to think he's used to this. And if Oklahoma goes for the strip, that's a risk, right? That's also a chance for Dylan Sampson to shed more tackles and make more plays. So this could go either way.
Okay, so I'll just ask you this. What's your bigger concern? Nico turning the ball over, because he likes to extend plays too. He'll run. He's thrown 2 interceptions this year, even though we're not sure that they were all his fault. And the other question that I will ask you is simply him or Sampson. Who are you more worried about turnovers?
Nico only because a lot of things could not be Nico's fault, and he could turn the ball over. And with Sampson, it would be all on him. I think that Nico, again, it's not just him being a first-year starter. It's Brew McCoy coming back from injury. It's a couple of new receivers. Tennessee has to – they haven't really fully developed a rapport yet. It's been three games. And by the way, one of the reasons it's hard to develop a rapport, the offense has been so darn vanilla because 2 games because 2 of the games my mind's drawing a blank here, but 2 of the games were against such bad teams that they were honestly, that's just how it was going to go. And so they didn't get to play a lot. And so I don't think it's I think it's Nico, but it's not Nico's fault.